that no one transgress and wrong his brother in this matter, because the Lord is an avenger in all these things. As we told you beforehand and solemnly warned you, for God has not called for us for impurity, but in holiness.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. It's truly a privilege and an honor to have the opportunity to come and speak before you here today. And I hope the things I say before you is not something to discourage, but encourage and to think about and strive for those things pertaining to the heavenly hope. It's kind of good to see Mike today, or Mike Eagle. So he's been harassed. He's had a lot not to do because he keeps harassing me during the week. But Mike, it is really great to see you today, and it's good to see Claire and Laura as well. And I don't think I've heard Brian cough yet today, so he must be getting better. It's great to see those that have been fighting illness are back with us. And remember Rebecca and Dawn as they're traveling. Remember Patty Boggs too, and that's where that's where Terry's at, because Patty had to go back into the hospital, as some of you may know. And Ryan is traveling as well. And remember Ryan in your prayers as he is traveling. Today I want to talk about dating in the Bible. And the thing is that you will never find the word dating in the Holy Scriptures. It's never used in the Bible. And sometimes I think when we don't find certain words in the Bible, we think that we can never talk about such things. And the thing is, we need to talk about these things because there is some kind of dark statistics out there that I think we need to consider. For example, abortion is, according to the Center for Disease Control back in 2021, there were 625,000 abortions. 78% of people of America that is between the ages of 18 through 29 consider it acceptable for unmarried couples to live together. 50 to 65% of people believe living together before marriage improves the odds of a successful relationship. And 48% of those adults think that couples should cohabitate first before seeing if it's ideal to get married. And those statistics prove otherwise. And the reason why I want to bring up these statistics is because that these things are very disturbing, because we always want to go after people who believe in abortion or people who believe in these relationships, and we never go back to where these first principles start. And I think that's what we need to do, is go back to the beginning instead of trying to deal with these things at the end. And what I want to talk about here, I try to get an idea or try to get you to understand what we need to talk about here when it comes to finding those relationships, what those relationships should involve, and keep in mind what Solomon and so many other people that is inspired by God tried to warn us and encourage us to do. And I looked at a sermon called 5 Red Flags when it comes to dating someone. And some of those things I took from that sermon and try to put in my own application. And I hope that when we look at these things, we can not only talk about what we need to do to improve maybe as young adults, but also, too, when it comes to trying to encourage the youth or trying to encourage young people, maybe we have better ways of talking to them about these things. So I hope that you'll follow along here. And once again, if you got questions about these things, I'm not going to tell you I'm the expert on dating. I'm not. But I do find things that we find in the Scriptures that we should consider and think about when it comes to the relationships of dating. One of the things that we should be concerned about and should be a red flag is when they are not pursuing Jesus Christ. If you look at the proverb writer in Proverbs chapter 12, or chapter 27, verse 12, he says, "The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it." And if you think about maybe when it goes out into this world today, we understand that we stay away from certain things because we know that there's danger there. If I ask some people that live in the Clarksburg area, what's one place I wouldn't go, you'd probably tell me, I could tell you exactly where not to go. If you told me of a bad place in Middleburn, for example, or a bad place in Bridgeport, or a bad place in Buchanan, you would tell me, well, I could tell you exactly, here's the bad place. You need to lock up your doors. You need to take your purse or your wallet with you. Be careful where you go here because it is bad news. My point is this, that should be a danger for us when we see any kind of individual, if we're wanting to have a relationship, if we see those things that just tells us it's screaming nothing but trouble, we should tell ourselves to stay away from it. That's why you see in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 3, 5 chapters back, he says the same thing again. It says the prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. I did this sermon on video last week. And one of the things that came up is a lady that I went to school with, and she says, I wish I heard about these things 48 or 30 some years ago. And that's just it. Sometimes we don't realize the danger until it's inevitably too late. But why don't we talk about these things now? Why don't we have these discussions now? Why can't we have these conversations now? And sometimes, even in the religious world, we say to ourselves, that's none of our business to discuss these things. Well, whose business, for one, is it? And two, you better tell some people in the Bible who talked about these things. You might want to remind them they shouldn't be talking about these things. But that's just it. These people in the Bible were talking about these things. And it was given that as a warning. That was given that as how great these things are and how dangerous they could be if we're not careful. That's why in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, it tells us, it says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Well, what partnership has with righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? One of the things that this individual brought up, and I thought was very interesting, is when you have a conversation with somebody, if you are dating someone, what is the first things you talk about? Because if I have a conversation with anybody, whether male or female, I'm going to talk about the things I like to do. And all of you guys know what I like to do. You know, I'll talk about sports, I'll talk about officiating, I'll talk about video games, I'll talk about scripture, and that's just it. Within an hour conversation, you should know the stuff I like to talk about. Now take that in your equation when it comes to dating. When you have the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with somebody, does Christ come up in that relation or that conversation? It doesn't have to be this church, but does Christ come up in the conversation? Do you talk about how you believe in that Christ? Because that should be a warning sign. If the thing that we talk about the most is not if we don't talk about Christ, but we talk about our likes and our hobbies and our jobs and our families, but Christ does not come up in the conversation, we got to ask ourselves, is this an individual that will pursue Christ just as much as I will? Because if it doesn't, then maybe there's some danger there. Another thing too, another sign should be when those that love you don't love who you're dating. It should be a red flag, folks, when an individual that is your parent, your grandparent, your best friend, your second best friend, your third best friend, your cousin, whatever the case may be, if you've got so many individuals telling you this is not the ideal relationship that you should have, maybe they're trying to tell you something. They're not doing it for their own benefit, they're doing it for your benefit. That's why in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 9, it says, oil perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. Consider this. Has anybody that has that close a relationship to you did it with the intention of putting you in harm's way? There should be warnings. And realize that when it comes to this opportunity to date someone, if it's not ideal with some people, maybe it's not because of what he is doing, it's because of what you know, what you like, and what you don't like. You know, remember Uncle Buck that had that niece that had a boyfriend? I think his name was Nat or Bug. His name was Bug. And he saw that he wasn't good news. And we come to find out at the end of all this kind of horrible situation that he was right. And he didn't want to tell her he was right. He just wanted her to go home. There's an individual we can understand that was looking out for the best interests of her. And folks, think about that when your friend tells you this is not a good idea. Think about if your parent or your grandparent is telling you that this is not a good idea. Look how in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15, it says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. I've always talked about Mike Piazza. He was a catcher for the New York Mets. And one time somebody asked Mike Piazza, what makes you a great catcher? He didn't say himself. He said everybody else that he watched being a catcher. He talked about Johnny Bench. He talked about Benito Santiago. He talked about Darren Erstad. He talked about individuals that he looked at and he wanted to emulate not just one guy. He wanted to emulate all these guys. He looked for advice to be the best he could be because he knew that he couldn't do it on his own. And when it comes to our relationships here, brethren, you know and you understand God does not want you to go through this journey alone. When it comes to following Him, when it comes to finding a mate, when it comes to building a family. You all see that we have our own individual responsibilities, but you also understand when we go through the epistles that it wasn't for us to deal with all these difficulties alone. That's why he tells us in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 10, it says, do not forsake your friend and your father's friend. Do not go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away. Take some advice. Don't be afraid to take advice. Another thing, too, is when you don't experience healthy conflict. Brethren, if there is a marriage relationship out there that doesn't argue and fight with one another, God bless you. But I like to see who that couple is. Caitlin Brady, you don't count. You just got started. But the thing is, there is always going to be conflict, but it should be healthy conflict. Remember what I said back in Bible study about the church? Brethren, tell me, has the church ever had conflict? Yes, it has. Whether you want to accept that or not. There's some churches like, oh no, we don't want to talk about the things we had to deal with. No, you need to talk about the things you have dealt with. Because brethren, there's relationships out there of other churches that are going through the same things you are. And they need to understand what they need to do if they go through these difficulties and how to overcome. It's beautiful that Paul says that this is like Christ and his church when it comes to the relationship of husband and wife. Because, brethren, the church will have difficulties and they have to take on those challenges, especially if they're trying to get sin out of that church. They deal with a variety of problems. They deal with a variety of conflicts. The church works on unity and keeps herself unblemished from the world. You look at the church and you say, yeah, that's what the church is supposed to be. But brethren, if you look back when it comes to a marriage relationship, it's the exact same thing. It's supposed to deal with difficulties. It's supposed to have conflict. Because you are two unique individuals that decide to live together, to be husband and wife, and be as one. You ever notice that when it comes to Ecclesiastes, it tells us a threefold cord is not broken. And usually that's tied into a marriage relationship. And the reason being is because in that relationship it involves a husband, a wife, and God. And to intertwine that, I need to have God in our relationships. When it comes to buying a house, when it comes to raising children, when it comes to finding a job, when it comes to doing something that's going to take a great burden on the household, whatever the case may be, God's got to be a part of that. Just like God has to be a part of the church. If it's not, then don't be surprised when the conflict comes. It could destroy the church. It could also destroy the marriage relationship. Another thing, too, is when there is no trust. I'm going to put one verse up here. And it's when it talks about love bears all things, believe all things, hopes all things, endures all things. This word here, when you look in the Greek, there's another meaning for this. And it's trust all things. Married adults have higher levels of relationship satisfaction and trust than those with a partner. Brethren, jealousy is a very, 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 very dangerous thing. And it's no surprise that when God tells us about jealousy, it is considered a sin. And the reason why jealousy is a very dangerous thing because it always feels threatened. Anybody here think about the first serious relationship that you have ever had? And you know what that first time was like, what that first kiss was like, what that first touch was like. You know, brother, a lot of people don't like dancing, and the reason being is because those things involve those few things. But remember, when it comes to these first moments, because they have innocence and because it is a great feeling, because it shows some great things, it feels like this is the only individual I want to share this with. I don't want anybody else. I want this individual because this is the individual that I've experienced this for the very first time. And I want this, and I don't want nothing messing with it. And there's where jealousy comes in sometimes, because when we feel like this, we don't realize sometimes we will go out and ruin it with our jealousy. Because we become obsessed with it. We'll talk about that towards the end. But we do kind of some crazy things. There was a girl that we knew at one of the jobs I worked at that ended up leaving her husband for another guy. And he worked at this same job too. But one of the things I found very shocking when it come to this relationship is he went around and told a bunch of us not to talk to her. She was everybody's friend. But when she started being with this guy told her, says, don't talk to her anymore. And I know exactly why. Because he can't trust her. Because if he was able to persuade her from her husband, you don't think for a second somebody else could persuade her from him? She's not with him now. The thing is, brethren, when it comes to trust, if there's an individual that you have in a relationship and you can't trust him to be away from you for 5 minutes, if you can't trust her to be away from you and be around other people, if there's not that kind of trust there, you need to stay away from that, because that trust does not get any better. Even if you get married, that trust does not get any better. It gets worse. And the same thing where you know he's not going to do anything wrong, but you can't trust him. If there's an individual that has no reason whatsoever to do you wrong, but you can't trust him to be away from you, you need to stay away from that guy too. It is better, folks, to be single on a Friday night, to be single on a Friday night married. If you can't have this kind of trust, if you're not able to have this kind of relationship with one another, you must understand there's some danger that is involved in that. Be careful. And finally, it's dangerous when they lead you away from Christ. Proverbs chapter 5, verse 19 tells us, a lovely deer, a graceful doe, let her breast fill you at all times with delight, and be intoxicated always in her love. You ever listen to John Boy and Billy, and they had this thing called Dumb Crook News? and how they always talked about how they did some of the dumbest stuff in everyday life. And the ones that were more entertaining, and I'm not trying to glorify or anything, but usually at the end it said alcohol was a part of the problem, or alcohol was involved. There's no surprise, it should be for us, that there's labels out there now when they sell alcohol, it says drink responsibly. Even Habakkuk tells us that wine's a traitor. The reason why I bring this up is because of what is said here. Because if we understand when it comes to alcohol, you know that people have done a lot of dumb and stupid and foolish things and want to blame it on the bottle. We've seen people have ruined their lives forever because of alcohol. My point is this. There's a reason why this wise man, who talks about how great it is to have this relationship with his bride, also warns us about the dangers and entrapments of lust. Because just as much as we've seen people do really dumb things when it comes to the bottle, we have also seen people do a lot of dumb things for someone else. And it goes back to that relationship, that first kiss, that first touch, the first intimate situation. Solomon is very aware of this. You should be aware of it as well. And the thing is that a lot of people will say, well, this is stuff that needs to just belong to the bedroom. This is stuff that needs to be belonged at home. Brethren, let's get out of that mindset and think that these are discussions that's only allowed at home, because Solomon gives us this warning. He gives it broadly and loudly in his books because he warns us of the same things that entrapped him. And he is a wise man and still did foolish things. I put up two stories here. One time, at one of the congregations I worked with, one of my brethren in Christ wanted to have a teen class. And one of the things that he wanted to talk about in his teen class was he wanted to talk about things like this. Brethren, when it comes to intimate relationships, those are going to be some things that you don't want to talk to mom and dad about. But you need to talk about them. He thought that this would be an ideal way for them to have that discussion and kind of have it in a setting where they don't feel threatened or embarrassed. Right when he got ready to do this class, one couple came in and said, absolutely not. We're not going to have this discussion in this teen class. That's for us to do. And it stopped. Here's the tragedy of it all. 6 months after that discussion, their daughter got pregnant. Now she's been in multiple relationships now. I'm not saying that they're necessarily to blame, but could it be that if we were able to have these kind of things discussed, maybe we don't have this situation happen? Because it just takes one moment. Just like when it comes to alcohol, it just takes one moment. Just like when it comes to having this intimate relationship, it just takes one moment. And then we've lost all control. There's a guy I used to ref soccer with. He was a fantastic official. Next year, I didn't ref with him anymore. And the reason being is because he got jailed for attempted murder. He was involved with a married woman, and they both decided that they were going to have a hitman take out her husband. Guys, this is not Hollywood. This is probably an hour and a half away from you. The situation the first situation I talked about, it's not far away either. Don't think that these crazy situations happen just miles away. It doesn't happen in Clarksburg. It doesn't happen in Bridgeport. It doesn't happen in our little church. These things happen. And the sad thing is that the more and more we have talked about now is how, when it comes to divorce, how we talk about these things. And we're talking about them more and more often. And the reason being is because we don't want to talk about the very first steps when it comes to dating, or the very first steps when it comes to the relationship, or the seriousness and the dangers when it comes to sex and premarital sex. We don't want to talk about these things because those are things that are just very, but they're necessary. And if I got to embarrass myself in front of a congregation to get the point across, so be it. Because what is this relationship going to involve? The relationship that you have right now, as a husband or wife, as a girlfriend or boyfriend, as a girl looking for a guy or a guy looking for a girl. When you look at these things, have you asked yourself, well, maybe I'm going the right path, or maybe I'm going down the wrong hole? And the thing is that this should either warn you or keeps you on the right path. We need to talk about these things. The psalmist reminds us in Psalms 119, because I meditate on your precepts and fix my eyes on your ways. And it's because he has to keep his guard at all times. Danger does not always come with a red flag. It doesn't look like a red flag. May I encourage you folks today? There's one here who struggles with this. What can we do to help you out? There's challenges that go on through all of us. You're not alone in this. It's not some sermon that I just kind of singled some individuals out. This is something that we all can learn from. And what can we do to improve our relationship with God? What can we do when it comes to finding that significant other, that special someone? What can we do to show that we want that to be a part of our relationship? Maybe you need help with that this morning. Maybe you need to take that first step when it comes to baptism. When it comes to, if you believe these things, you've heard these things, take the opportunity to confess Christ before men and be buried in baptism. But you also understand, too, that when we take these steps, we don't just stop right here. We continue on. And some of us struggle with continuing on. Remember when we go back to the prophet Nahum, we talked about that little pie or that graph chart, where sometimes we're climbing so high and then we drop down, and we need to get back up again. Maybe that's you this morning. What can we do to help you out? Maybe there's one here that needs to pray about something. Taking the opportunity to come and request prayer is not something to be shameworthy. We need all kinds of prayer. There's all kinds of challenges that we all go through. And you're not unique. We all go through them. But take this opportunity, if you're struggling with something, let's sit here and let's pray about it. Because you're not alone. And we'd be more than happy to do so. So with those things being said, if there's one here who needs to respond to this gospel call and to respond to this opportunity, take your moments and times right here, right now.